Welcome everybody to our JCM Miller lecture here today in the BCDSS, the Bonn Center for Dependency and Slavery Studies. And we're honored to have you all here, and we're particularly honored to have Professor Nasir Uddin here with us today. I first came across Nasir's work in 2023, around 3.5 years ago, when I first started my research on the situation of the Rohingya people in the refugee camps in Bangladesh. And if you just search for knowledge around Rohingyas displacement in their everyday lives, the situation of protractedness and statelessness, you will always come across this name. So who is Professor Nasir Uddin? He's a cultural anthropologist from the University of Chittagong. And I just heard from him today that he's been working on the situation of the Rohingya in Bangladesh and their lives, and also the violence that they have encountered in Myanmar for 30 years already. Over his academic life, he's published a lot on this issue. He has held visiting fellowships at Harvard University, University of Oxford, School of Oriental and African Studies, but also University of Hull, a partner of BCDSS, at Kyoto University, and many others. And also a few times at Heidelberg University at the South Asia Institute. And when Nasir contacted me in November, so he told me, hey, I'm Benjamin, I'm here in Germany for a couple of months on a visiting fellowship. Would be great to meet and to give a presentation at the University of Bonn. And that was great, great that you took this initiative. And then we thought, okay, yes, we have to make that sure so that you can enrich the discussions we're having here at the Bonn Center for Dependency and Slavery Studies with your insights and knowledge. Nasir will speak about statelessness, refugeehood, and subhuman life, which is also the title of one of his, let's say, most famous books that he published in 2020 with Oxford University Press, which was an ethnographic study. But he's also published numerous other edited volumes with colleagues on humanitarian rights issues in context of the Rohingya crisis, on refugees in the media, on coping strategies and the role of agency, or people's agency in the context of this crisis, and particularly interesting in my opinion, also on onward migrations, mobilities of the Rohingya and the diaspora community in Southeast Asian countries of the Rohingya. So you might know that here at the BCDSS, the issue of the situation of the Rohingya people and how it also their situation emerged historically is not a new topic here in the center. We've had a PhD student, Anas Ansar, who conducted his PhD studies, I think, from 2000. He was one of the first PhDs, I think, 2019 onwards or 20 onwards or so. Anas wrote about, or titled it on the notion of precarity, and let's say a protracted precarity of these people. And he also conducted research in the refugee camps in Bangladesh, but also in Malaysia, for instance. I personally was involved in a study together with Anas and Professor Sayeda Rosanna Rashid from Dhaka University in the last 2 years, where we looked on, let's say, gendered aspects of violence in the refugee camps that was funded by MEXT, a program from the UK, and it's also supported by the BCDSS. And whenever I have a question about, okay, I need more details on a certain aspect, I'm turning to one of the books where Nasir wrote or that he published. So I think, Nasir, the floor is yours. We're really curious to learn more from you, and I think we are very excited to having you here, and we'll see how your research of the past years sort of, let's say, fits also to the agenda of the BCDSS, what we can learn from you. And I'm very happy that you all are here. And after the talk, please feel free just to approach Nasir with any kind of questions. So we're looking forward to a lively discussion with you. Please, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you so much, Benjamin, for a wonderful, generous introduction. And I represent here 3 institutions. I'm the professor of anthropology at the University of Chittagong, so I acknowledge they just granted sabbatical leave for my tour. And University of Heidelberg, South Institute, I'm a visiting professor there. I offer a seminar at the Department of Anthropology, so I also acknowledge Heidelberg University, and my whole tour has been sponsored by Humboldt Foundation, so I acknowledge Humboldt Foundation. And also here, Bonn Center for Dependency and Slavery Studies for inviting me. And to all of you, thank you so much for coming and joining. So I was just started talking with the professor, and I travel a lot, and I share my research and experience. And I feel that it's a kind of learning through sharing. This is the kind of philosophy I always maintain, and I actually travel around the world. And when I talk about Rohingya refugees, Rohingya people, it's not something like, typical research presentation of typical research findings, like just I did go to a field, spend some time, took some notes, and came back and wrote down and presenting something before an academic audience. This is a very typical, stereotyping generally of academic, rituals. But when I present Rohingya, it's a kind of my lifelong reflection of my engagement in different capacities. So I will talk a little bit about methodology. So let's start, and probably I'm suggested to continue 40-45 minutes. I'll try to talk about it, and particularly subhuman life. This is the idea I articulated. I could say I re-articulated this idea in 2020. Since then, it became very popular theoretical alternative to understand the people living in extreme form of vulnerabilities. So this is a kind of photo, and this is a kind of fake cover. Since it's recording, on record, I cannot say many things. So I will filter a little ideas. Probably I will keep it for Q&A session. So this is a kind of photo. This is a fake but real cover. Before showing real cover, I need to make kind of disclaimer. This is a kind of the photographs publicly available through various media outlets for the dehumanize the Rohingya people. So before using the photos of Rohingya, it's a kind of research ethics, because when we study, people in vulnerable, very humanitarian crisis situations, we just cannot reproduce the same vulnerable faces. So that's why the photographs I have used here, all are published in different media outlets. I have almost thousands of photographs of Rohingya, but I haven't used a single photo, because to me, the Rohingya people are popularly represented in a very, distressed humanitarian crisis. So that's why there's a kind of disclaimer. But I'm showing all the photographs. These are published. So this is actually the cover page of my talk. Before showing this, I need to make it clear, kind of make disclaimer. So his name is, shadow name. We don't use real name in terms of this. Yusuf, for example. Yusuf, he just crossed the river. The photo was taken in 2017 following the genocidal attack on Rohingya civilians started from 25th of August 2017. Yusuf, actually his whole family members were killed in front of his eyes. It's just 11 months kid. He was swimming. Actually, Naf River is a border river between Bangladesh and Myanmar. And he crossed the Naf River, and he just arrived at Shahapuri Deep. It's the Shahapuri Island, small island. He became number. So this is a photo. It follows, the image shows a lot of narratives, a lot of background, a lot of histories. I will be back to this photo later. But this is one form of subhuman life. Why? I will talk about it later, but this is the cover page of my talk. So this is structure presentation, some theoretical framework. I talk less theory. because I always, feel empirical experience more meaningful than theoretical discussion, but still important. And anthropology and Rohingya identity, ethnicity, denationalization, statelessness, state of the Rohingya after 2017, and the idea of subhuman life, and it is the structure. This is a kind of theoretical take. Many of you might know a lot of ideas how people became stateless and denationalized. Saskia Sassen's ideas very popular, and many of Hannah Arendt's rights to have rights. The totalitarianism. This is a very common idea. And Roger Brubaker's citizenship laws produce statelessness. The whole idea of citizenship is a very slippery concept. It actually produces render people stateless, non-citizens. And also Anders Weimar is also, you might know, state building, particularly post-colonial state. There are a lot of state building and nation formation procedures rendered many people stateless. So this is applicable. And Sheila Ben Habib, rights of others. This is also a very popular idea. And Linda Bosniak, the state's politics of exclusion. State always, it has its own politics of inclusion, exclusion, so kind of idea. And Alit Sacher is a very popular theory too. Citizenship regime structurally. Since, the whole idea of citizenship came in human society, it actually, produced citizenship, non-citizenship, exclusion or inclusion, this kind of ideas. And also Margaret Somers stated this through historical and social processes. Because, the idea and the event of exclusion or inclusion, it doesn't just fall down from the sky suddenly. It doesn't just grow up from the land suddenly overnight. It's a kind of historical process. There are a lot of theories, but these are actually relevant to understand Rohingya statelessness, denationalization. I will be back a little bit, but there's a fundamental ideas. Now, this is Kutupalam, the world's largest refugee camps, the Rohingya people I'm talking about. This is the largest refugee camp in the world. So I spent a long time here, and I was talking to Benjamin, almost I spent my life long here, because it is located in the southeastern part of Bangladesh, Cox's Bazar. I was born there, actually. So I was born and brought up there. And I started first professional academic research in 1997, when I was writing my master's thesis on the crisis of social integrations between host community and refugees. So it's almost 30 years ago. I started my professional research on Rohingya, but even before that, I was actually, born and brought up there. So I was growing up. My maturity, my understanding with the Rohingya has been transformed, over the decades. So this is a kind of very brief idea. That's what I said in the beginning. It's not something I just go and come back and write something and present before the academic body. It's not that. So the long-term ethnography field were almost over 3 years I spent there. And 3 decades of micro-observation as the local resident of Oxford, what I'm claiming, 50 traumatized micro-narratives of Rohingya genocide survivors. Is actually SOAS funded the big project. Is about recording traumatized narratives, the people who just fled genocidal attack across the border in 2017, 25th of 2017. At that time, I recorded 500 narratives, what kind of experience did it go through in this time. And 17 intensive evidential narrative records of Rohingya genocide victims. So all are genocide survivors, but victims are those who are victims. So we are, working on a research project on genocide denial. Why particular genocide is recognized or not, it does not depend on the victim's claim making, rather than international code of justice, global geopolitics, a lot of issues involved. So for this project, we recorded 70 intensive evidential narratives. What is the victims? We are building a kind of methodological tools for genocide research. It's called intensive evidential memory recordings. It's something like genocide is something who actually the person who bodily embodied the genocidal testimonies, like wounded person and sexual abuse. So this kind of narratives I have. And I actually would archive research on particularly colonial foundations of Myanmar, particularly British colonial record, and also the 2,000 years of independent Arakan Kingdom. I have a lot of historical documents, and I led almost 8, now running to almost 10 big research projects is almost during the last 20 years. So, and the field experience of diaspora around the world, I actually traveled around and also interviewed a lot of diaspora Rohingya people who are living in Australia, Lakamba, in Sydney, and in UK, Bradford, in America, New York, and Wisconsin, Madison, and also in Japan, Tatebayashi, and India, and Malaysia, Penang. So there's a kind of diaspora. There's a big project I just covered, and also constant contact with the transnational Rohingya networks and activities. So that's the kind of my whole lifelong engagement with the topic. This is a kind of big, largest Rohingya camp. This is my fieldwork photographs. I just covered the face because we don't disclose our, informant's identity. So there's a big team that worked with me that recorded traumatized narratives. These are my fieldwork documents, and there's a diaspora activist. There's a lot of cases here, and I also doing field work in Japan, Tatebayashi. This in UK and Australia. So these are my books. I actually published a lot. This is the book that I will talk about today. The idea I generated, the Subhuman Life, is published by Oxford University 2020, 2023, Voice of the Rohingya People, particularly genocidal narratives. Almost I published like 150 narratives. Here you can find a lot of ethnocide, genocide, and domicide. You might know the burning down the houses and settlements. It's called domicide, that kind of term. And also this one I published in 2012 when there's a Thar influx took place in 2012, and the Rohingya crisis 2021. And these are very latest one, 2024, 2025. And I also covered this kind of life study, particularly South Asian countries and Southeast Asian countries was their life. And these are Bengali books because there's a kind of misunderstanding about Rohingya ethnicity and identity, who are Rohingya, who are Rohingya, whether they are Bengalis or not, a lot of debates. And I wrote it that the Rohingya, why the Rohingya and this Rohingya ethnicity, and you might know, there's a kind of debate about Myanmar state narratives. Rohingya people are illegal Bengali migrants. They migrated to the Arakan state during British colonial period. This kind of debates. So I wrote about it in details, and also in Oxford's book in chapter 2, I particularly wrote about Rohingya ethnicity and identity. So this is the kind of basic idea, major ethnic groups in Myanmar. We are talking about Rohingya, they live in Rakhine state. It was previously Arakan. And this is about actually who are Rohingyas. There's a lot of debates, but I'll be happy to respond to any questions. But my talk is not about identity, but I'll be happy to respond to any questions about any confusions about identity. But 4 points I want to share here. Rohingya people, Rohingyas are ethno-linguistic religious minority. Ethno-linguistic religious, they are triple minorities. They are ethnic minorities, they are linguistic minorities, because majority of people live in Burmese language, they speak in Rohingya language, and also they're religious minority because predominantly majority of people are Buddhist, Rohingya people are Muslims. So many, scholars write about Rohingya Muslims. So this kind of triple binary. Mike Chan, you might know, Mike Chan is a renowned historian of Arakan public settlement as a professor of SOAS. And he wrote his PhD dissertation in 1999, published from Michigan University Press. And he claimed that actually during the last 1,000 years, Rohingya, particularly Arakan Muslims and Arakan Buddhists, they have been living together in the Rakhine area, Arakan state, and Burmese came later. Just history of Burma is like 200 years ago, during the 1,000 years of independent Arakan kingdom. So that's why Saren Siddiqui, one of the renowned historian of medieval Bengal, They are the Rohingya people that descended of Maoris, Arab, Persian traders, preachers, Mughal, Tark, Pathan, Bengali soldiers, come migrants who arrived between 9th and 19th centuries. This is another authentic history. And many of you might know that Abdul Karim is also a renowned historian of medieval Bengal, particularly Arakan historian. And he also wrote about it, Rohang or Rosang, the capital of Arakan. And since 1430, and I have also my own findings about it. That's what I wrote. This is 64 years, 2 phases. One is 14 to 6 to 30, and 1784 to 1824, before 1824 when British occupied this territory. This is 40 years, and there's 26 years. So altogether, 2,000 years of independent Arakan. Bamar or Burmese ruled this Arakan kingdom only 64 years. So now, this also authenticated by Francis Buchanan, you might know, was the Hamilton, Epiphanius, and the Harvey. So it's all historical records. So let's go. This is the kind of where Rohingya people living in Myanmar. There's a townships, and this is Bangladesh. Initially, they were living in 2 places, one Uki and Teknaf, before 2017. There are 2 official camps, but after 2017 is now 34 temporary camps that house officially 1.3 million people, but unofficially we know more than 1.5 million Rohingya people living. This is the territory, Uki and Teknaf particularly. So this is the history of statelessness and refugeehood. Particularly, you might know, Burma became independent in 1948. And this is very interesting. The Mujahideen carried out an armed rebellions demanding an independent Arakan state for Muslims in 1954, but failed. That's the one interesting point. And even so, the Rohingya were close to having their autonomy in the 1950s and the democratic government of UNO, because until Ne occupied state territory, Myanmar Burma state in 1962, Rohingya people were in the complete state system of state formation and national building. And you might know that in the first cabinet, 3 members from Rohingya community, Arakan Muslims, they became, ministerial position. They hold the ministerial position in whole cabinet. And a lot of Arakan Muslim representatives in the parliament before 1962. But when General Ne just, occupied military coup in 1962, since 1962 onward, the history of Rohingya has been full of exploitation, persecution, and discriminations. When military, took over state power until today, Myanmar has been under military rule. And during the last, just 10 years, particularly so-called democratic regimes under National League for Democracy, particularly Aung San Suu Kyi-led political party. At that time, it was also actually military rule in implicit form, because according to constitutional reform in 2008, actually military confirmed their dominant participation in state management, because this constitution confirmed that there should be 3 ministerial positions for the military, and 25% seats should be reserved for the military person, and vice president should be chosen from military. So this is the kind of military rules for a long time. So then Rohingya Muslims were removed and barred from civil posts, restriction of movement were imposed, and property and land were confiscated. Then General Ne, this actually the banned the Rohingya socio-cultural organization to oust Rohingya from the country. In 1978, General launched first Operation Dragon. In Rohingya language called Operation Nagamin. There's the first influx took place in 1978. And then it forced almost 250,000 Rohingyas to enter Bangladesh. The first official influx took place. There are 4 remarkable big influx took place. One is 1978, second one in 1991, 1992, and third one is 2016, and fourth one is 2017. So, despite of regular migrations, but these are 4 major influx took place. Then citizenship law, 1982, conferred nationality to the 130 nationals excluding the Rohingya peoples. So 1982 actually rendered the citizenship law, rendered Rohingya people stateless. So we are talking a group of people who actually do not exist in the world, because Myanmar doesn't recognize them as citizens, and Bangladesh even doesn't recognize them even as refugees. So Rohingya people, hundreds of thousands of people, they don't exist in the world in the legal structure. That's the irony. So then in 1991, so this is a kind of influx history. So this is a kind of logic. Myanmar status human logic is those whose ancestors lived in Burma before British occupied in 1824. Since Rohingya settled in Arakan in recent times, particularly during the British colonial period, they are illegal Bengali migrants and not entitled to citizenship in Myanmar. So point is that, so British occupied this territory in 1824. So according to national citizenship law, those who were settled or living before British occupied the territory, they are they are entitled to citizenship. Since Rohingya peoples are illegal Bengali migrants and they migrated this part of Rakhine, Burma during British colonial period, so they are not entitled. So that's the kind of state's narratives. So I'm putting some counter logic. Particularly Buchanan, Francis, I will show some critical notes. All these four documents, Francis Buchanan, Snow Classical Journals Record, Wana Serbian's database, and Walter Hamilton's book. All these four records, actually, these were published before British occupied the territory. All this, you might know Francis Buchanan. Francis Buchanan, for example, the comparative vocabulary of some languages spoken in the Burma Empire, Asiatic Research is published. And you might know Francis Buchanan is considered as one of the authentic history of South and Southeast Asia. Francis Buchanan categorically wrote that a particular group of people living in northern Rakhine State at the time, they were claiming themselves as a particular group of people, and they spoke in a particular language called Rohingya. Okay, so it was published before British occupied the territory. Second one, language of Burma, the classical journal. Many of you might know classical journal is a journal considered as the historical baseline of Southeast Asian history, particularly Indonesia, Malaysia, Vietnam, Cambodia, Laos, Myanmar, Singapore. So classical journal published an article, Language of Burma, page 107. It categorically said a group of people living in this part of Burma at that time, they claim themselves Rohingya. And also, you want a survey. This also linguistic database of South and Southeast Asian people. Also, it was published from Berlin, and one of my friends translated it and I used in my book. So also clearly said this is Rohingya, spelling Rohingya. And Walter Hamilton is a big volume, a 900 pages book. The geographical, statistical, historical description of Hindustan and the adjacent countries. It is published from London, page 82. It's also claimed that there's a group of people living. So all this actually published during Burmese rule in Arakan. Burmese occupies this territory in 1784, and British occupied this territory in 1824. This is 40 years. So it's not something British were occupying this territory and British actually promoted this publication, not that. Burmese rulers were actually ruling this Arakan at the time this publication. So this categorically established the presence of a particular group living in Rakhine State even before British occupied the territory. Is categorically actually dismantled the state's narrative of modern Myanmar. And I have some more documents, like for example, this is a very popular file. This is Rangoon University Central Student Union, 1936. Rangoon University Central Student Union, you might know, Rangoon University Central Student Union were very active and radical organization to, execute anti-colonial movement in Southeast Asia at the time. And this 1936 committee, this is Arakan Muslims, Emirati, and this is General Aung San, Aung Suu Kyi's father. So Suti's father was the general secretary of Rangoon University Student Union in 1936 when he was working under Arakan Muslims in Russia. So decolonization movement was actually, working together, how they became illegal Bengali migrants. And also, Rangoon University has students' union, Muslim associations, as a big group of people. And these are the member of parliaments from the whole list of member of parliaments from 36. So how could it be possible for illegal Bengali migrants become the member of parliament? This kind of state narrative. So it's all documents I have just given as appendix in many of my writings. So the question is, how did an illegal person become the president of Rangoon University Central Student Union when Suti's father was the Secretary General under Arakan Muslims? And how did some illegal persons form an association at Rangoon University? And how did some illegal persons become the elected members of the member of parliament of a country? So the point is clear. The answers are quite understandable. Myanmar has distorted the history and created state-sponsored narrative history to justify state's atrocities. So that's a bird life. So making a particular group of people a bird life, you need to just, make them illegal, non-entity before the law. So I will talk about it a bit later. But this is the historical narratives. So why do Rohingya people flee Myanmar? This is based on my long-term experiences. I just quoted a couple of points. Their atrocious living condition, poor human rights situation, forced labor imposition, unexplainable. This is why people. So this is kind of bullet points. And the labor conditions for the Rohingya in Rakhine State. But now, when we had a discussion about it, so I will talk about labor situation in Rakhine State now, and even in Bangladesh. The kind of comparative studies you can find, actually, there is no difference, whether they were in their country of origin or country of migrations. So labor conditions for Rohingya in Rakhine State are characterized by, systemic oppression, forced labor, extreme economic marginalizations. Denied citizenship, they face severe movement restrictions, frequent confiscation of land, and are forced into unpaid routine labor for military projects. They are largely excluded from formal employment and access to essential services. I'm just giving a couple of bullet points of the labor conditions. Forced labor, Rohingya individuals are routinely subject to forced labor, including working one day a week on government or military projects, performing overnight, sentry duty. And also restriction of movement, that they need to take permission from one village to other village. So then economic marginalizations, variable land, so is very common everywhere. Lack of rights since they are not citizens in Myanmar state structure. And also routine expeditions. Now they are actually double tortured communities called. Double torture is because they are exploited by Myanmar junta government, and also they are exploited by now Arakan army. Because many of you might know, Arakan army now occupied almost 90% of the Rakhine state. And during the last 1.5 year, more than 1,500 people, Rohingya people, crossed the border again due to the torture. And we interviewed a couple of people, a group of people, and we were asking, why you didn't come in 2017, but why are you coming now? And many claim that this time, in 2017, it was tolerable, but now the torture has become intolerable. So what's the situation you can imagine? You might know that's one before 2021, they're very, allies. But after the 1st February of 2021 now, Suu Kyi's in prison. And this is, Time magazine said, Buddhist lauded because of the hate campaign against, Rohingya people. And you might know there's the Mahabharata movement, a lot of, but there's a kind of, Buddhist extremist, we call Buddhist fundamentalists. Not all Buddhists, but Time magazine published this cover page. So this is a kind of 2017 case. Rohingya after August 2017. So this is UN fact-finding missions report published in 2018, 1 year after. According to this report, fleeing Bangladesh and refugees, almost 750,000 people came in 2017 and killed almost 10,000. Some other reports say 25,000. But according to UN reports, 10,000 people were killed in 2 months. Then raped, majority are gang raped, 1,900 people, and destroyed almost 398 villages, completely or partially burned down. And then wounded and injured, Bangladesh received 50,000 wounded people. Some people, they lost their legs, their hands, pregnant women, blooded. So this is according to UN fact-finding reports. There's a kind of photo burning, and you can see after the burning. This is the common, a lot of photos. These are the dotted, 25th of August to 26th, just 1 month. All red dotted. These villages were completely burned down. And this is the report. Al Jazeera, BBC, Amnesty International, Human Rights Watch, of almost 60% of the villages, Rohingya villages, completely burned down. So this is the whole village. And we interviewed a couple of, I'm an anthropologist. Always I try to substantiate with the people's narratives. So we interviewed and we found terrific, very terrifying information. Some like this, the whole village is encircled by military forces and then set fire on it. And many people are burned alive. There's a lot of cases. Okay, so these whole villages. I'm giving a couple of photos of influx again. Please, just soft-minded people should be careful. That's why I'm just giving some disclaimer at the beginning. Just some photos. You can see what kind of humanitarian crisis. So that's what I translated. I'm an anthropologist. I always try to understand the local narratives, how people, conceptualize, how they perceive their life in their language. I just translated. Tears are the constant companions of the life, both in Myanmar and Bangladesh. And Rohingya people see no present, no future, because Bangladesh is hosting 1.5 million people more than 8 years. Bangladesh is not willing to, host them anymore. And Myanmar doesn't want to bring them back. No third country is offering any asylums. So what's the future? They don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. So I have just 10 minutes more. I'll just talk about subhuman life a little bit, but I want to give you kind of labor condition in Bangladesh. This is the kind of labor condition for Rohingya people in Bangladesh. I showed one slide of Myanmar, but it's Bangladesh. Rohingya refugees in Bangladesh face severe labor restrictions with formal employment ban. There's no formal employment. Refugee cannot work. There's a formal ban, but still, for most of the precarious, informal, exploitative work, labor conditions marked by dangerous, unregulated, and sometimes forced labor, including exploitation of women and child labor. Couple of points, separate points. So can you understand legal restriction? The Bangladesh government restricts formal employment for the Rohingya, which limits them to informal, clandestine and humanitarian like cash for work. Just whatever you can give me, it's okay. I can do work for you. Then economic exploitation, refugees often face underpayment since they are not formally allowed, and excessive work hours, unsafe conditions without legal records. Many work in agriculture, construction, or day labor, often displacing local labor, which fuels tensions with the host community, because host community, started blaming that they are occupying the local job market by selling cheap labor. So vulnerability of women and children, there's a huge trafficking going on in this area, and human trafficking, as the lack of legal work options increases the options of risk of trafficking in the future premises of better life leading to abuse and exploitation. So that's a local market. And there are a lot of, that's why it's on record, just I'll say a little bit, there's a kind of, militant recruitment. There are a lot of cases recorded, but this not, so this is kind of, vulnerability always creates space for exploitations because their position is extremely vulnerable. Now I will go back to the subhuman idea. Just 7-8 minutes, I will finish it, okay? So the subhuman idea is interesting because actually how I developed it, I have written in my book in detail, but I'm giving you a kind of basic idea. So this is a book where I re-articulated this theoretical framework, the subhuman life. So these are existing theories to understand refugees. There's a domain of scholarship: refugees, asylum seeker, non-citizen, forcibly displaced people, illegal immigrants, camp people. This is the domain of scholarship. These are the theories. You might know Burlife, popular theories, Burlife, and Judith Butler, Precarious Life, Rejected People, Winner, and also Rise to Have Rights, Hannah Arendt, and Shaila Ben Habib, Whose Birth, Rise of Non-Citizen, Neglected Non-Citizen, Christy Balton, Championship, Sharon Anandos, many of you might know, and Necropolitics, H.L. Mbebe, and also Slippery Concept, Howard Schwarzman, and also part of this. And these are popular theories to understand refugee, migrations, non-citizen, statelessness, camp peoples. What actually I find, these all theories, we do respect to all the contributors. I find that actually these theories considered people as a kind of legal object. If you do not have legal entity, you are none, you are no one. It means that academia, on the other hand, justifies the atrocities committed against these people. So then I argued, which or who came first in human civilization, state or people? People came first, and state came in the human society, human civilization, and rendered people a legal object. So I tried to argue that there are a lot of people, hundreds of thousands of people around the world who have citizenship, who belong to a particular state, like Syrian refugees. In my book, I read details about it. Why they did go through this in extreme vulnerable positions. It means that they are not born life. They have legal entity, they have citizenship. So the problems with actually the state structure, that's I frame this idea, the subhuman life. And I said, no, this is not whether they're legal entity or not. Because we academics, we professionals, we scholars, we actually on the other way justify the state atrocities, putting them as a kind of, we are considering this group of people as a legal object, disregarding their human subjectivity. That's the argument I built. And in the last 2 decades, now the theory is available to understand is actually appeared inadequate to understand the Rohingya situations. So this kind of inadequacy created space for alternative theoretical understanding. That's what I tried to do. Let me give you kind of fundamental ideas. I quoted it from probably Encyclopedia of Anthropology or Social Cultural Anthropology, probably Wikipedia. There's a lot of books actually accommodated my idea, subhuman lives. Subhuman is a theory to understand the acute vulnerable conditions of people and nature of the state. Subhuman is a category of people who are born in human society, have no space in human community. Like Rohingya people, they don't exist in the legal structure. So subhuman does not receive treatments that a human deserves and does not live a life like a human being. Subhumans are born in the world, but the world doesn't own them. Why? We have 1948 UN Declaration of Human Rights. And according to human declarations, every individual has every right to nationality. Why then more than 10 million people stateless in the world? There is some problem with the state structure, modern state system. So subhuman are treated like all others, all non-humans. It does not like. So I find this Rohingya people time and again try to make me understand that animal receives some sort of sympathy, but the ways we were dealt with as if we are actually subhuman life. So that's where since they do not exist in the living structure. Subhuman is a particular kind of people who live in the border of life and death. It goes a little bit actually embedded. So subhumans are not human in their due dignity, rights, and voice are dealt with as if lesser than human beings. Okay, I'm giving you a couple of. So in my book, I try to kind of frame that these 5 conditionalities make a particular group of people subhuman. Like atrocious living conditions, an illegal object in a legal framework, homeless at home, and nowhere to go, free license of being killed, raped, and burned, a life worthy of extinctions. For example, this is a narrative. You know, I'm an anthropologist. I always, whatever I claim, I always try to substantiate with the local people's narratives. Let's see. I'm just reading out one narratives. Having listened to a big cows outside, I with my 2 daughters, one son of 3 years, and my wife, 6 months pregnant, fled from the back door. 2 days ago, I saw in Bazaar, local marketplace, how the Burmese military and Kichu Moggerfua, a few Buddhist yachts, were shooting and killing many Rohingyas mercilessly. While fleeing, we were caught by Burma military. That's Rohingya language, Burma military. They hit me with rifle and I fell down on the ground. Then they took my 2 daughters away and raped them in a nearby jungle and shoot them thereafter. I could not even wait to see what was happening to them as I was running to save my son, carrying on my soldier and holding hands of my pregnant wife. After walking 2 days and a night on the hills and jungles, we reached the bank of Naf River. My wife was so tired that she couldn't even breathe. While we were crossing no man's land, my wife suddenly exploded by the landmine and her body became split in a second. I could not recognize the face of my wife. I crossed the border with other Rohingyas, having more or less the similar experiences. When I arrived in Bangladesh, I meanwhile lost my 2 daughters, pregnant wife, my life in Arakan, my land, my living, my everything. I don't know what to do now, where to go, and how to survive. I'm just alive without a life. Why it happened to this person is because only he's a non-citizen? Is only because he's stateless? I have more touchy, more disturbing narratives. I'm skipping it because I have a lot of narratives. My argument, these I'm just skipping. I'm giving a couple of photos. The Wretched of the Art. You might know Franz Fanon. Why the person was dealt with in a way? Is this only because they're non-citizens? No. Atrocious living, the whole village was encircled by the military force and they were burned alive. It's only because the issue of non-citizen. There's something else. Fleeing a definite death to an indefinite life. Nowhere to go, none to say anything. That's one of the conditions of subhuman life. Living with a burden life. Recently, Homi Baba is circulating the life is burden for them. When the photo was published, it actually triggered huge criticism globally. And many international communities, human rights organizations, they came forward and started criticizing. My point is this, is this only because they're non-citizen or stateless? No. It is because of the state's nature approach towards the people of cultural, religious, and racial differences. There's some problems with the state system. The way they are treated as if they are lesser than human being, what I call subhuman. It actually became the cover page of the Time magazine. And Time says, Myanmar shame. I say it is all of our shame. It happened in front of our eyes. This is simply not a bird life. What our government said. No, this is not a bird life. Why? People living the borderline life and death. People that struggle for existence. That's what I said, subhuman life. That's the photo in the cover page I use. This is not a life of non-citizen stateless, but a life of subhuman. This another, Rihanna Begum. That's the last quote. We lead a life. We have an atrocious past, a critical present, and an uncertain future. We do not know what will happen to our lives tomorrow or where to go. Bangladesh doesn't want to host us anymore. Myanmar doesn't want to bring us back. No country is taking us willingly to give us asylum. There is no permanent and welcoming place for the Rohingyas in this world. Was it our fault that we were born in this world? Who will answer this question? Thank you.